Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Matt Lauer, Marketing Operations Manager at Alloy, an identity and decisioning platform that helps banks and fintech companies automate their decisions for onboarding, transaction monitoring, and credit underwriting. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Thanks, Glenn. Happy to be here and always love talking about marketing ops.
That's fantastic. Well, let's dive right in because you love marketing operations. I think that is the passion that you have for this discipline is amazing. And I know that you really find a great interest in the intersection of process, systems, and data and getting all of those to integrate together well. So how do you really know when you've arrived at that right point in that intersection?
There's a Supreme Court justice that famously said, "I know it when I see it." And if you know the case, you'll know what he's specifically talking about. But in this case, I think to me, I'll tell a story on how I discovered where it was, because my start in marketing operations was, of course, typical. It was a nonprofit politics job. So I started off, I was doing membership recruiting, and very quickly, I've always been a tech person, building computers, all of that, became kind of the CRM expert within this small 30, 35 person nonprofit. And within a year, I was kind of put in charge of the CRM. And then in 2016, there was this enormous recruiting project we had where we were trying to recruit 3x the previous yearly maximum of members. And I was working on the data and the CRM, and within a couple of months, it was behind schedule. And my bosses brought me in and said, "Matt, we want to put you in charge of the whole thing." And of course, I'm thinking, I'm 23. This is insane, but I'll do it. This sounds like fun, whatever that might be. And so I'm all of a sudden in charge of 3 people who are acting like BDRs, a systems manager on the CRM side, and 2 contractors that are keeping our connection between Marketo and our custom CRM alive. And so I'm finding myself looking at the data and saying, this isn't clean enough. We need to refine it. We need to figure out what our true membership number is. And so I work on that. And then I find that on the process side, there's no way we could ever reach our goal with the current process. Just everything's taking too long. The people process and also the automation isn't taking too long. So they say, all right, let's figure out how we can make this quicker, and there's less clicks, and it's easier to get through each stage, and we can start booking people without having to go back and forth on email. And after all of that was done, I said, all right, well, now what systems do we have? Do we have enough dashboarding done? Do we have enough presentation of where we're at? Are we able to track how far or how behind we are on where we need to be? And then, as I mentioned, the calendar integration tool. And so by the end of it, we not only caught back up to where we needed to be, but finished the goal 3 weeks ahead of schedule. And at the end of the day, I looked at it and I said, we've built this membership recruiting machine. Like, if we needed to triple next year, we just hire more people and we could theoretically do it so long as the funding's there. And I realized at that moment, I have no clue what I did because my nonprofit title didn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. It's not marketing ops, I can tell you that. But whatever I did there, I really liked. I really got a kick out of building this machine, making it automated, making it efficient, making it work for people, having good data spit out, having systems that work. I said, I need to figure out what this is. And so at the end of the day, wherever you are, whether it's marketing ops, rev ops, sales ops, some other random nonprofit title that doesn't fit any of that, if you find yourself working on process and then data and then systems, and you're doing that pretty much for a living, then you're there. You might not know what title it is, but you're there.
Yeah, I love that when it works, you'll know it. And that's an excellent example. Thanks so much for that story. And I think that also kind of, if you think about that, your nonprofit experience, for-profit experience, multiple industries that you have worked in, multiple different marketing operations technologies, that I think just gives you a wealth of knowledge to know when you've actually sort of arrived as well. But my next question would be then, how do you then determine which technology to use in a specific situation? You started a company, that company has an existing platform, a MarTech stack, et cetera. There's thousands of other tools that are out there. So given all of your experience in multiple industries, multiple formats, et cetera, how do you know which ones you should work with? Which technologies should you choose?
I think on the marketing ops side, we're now up to tens of thousands instead of thousands. And
Yeah,
the latest
exactly.
report
Probably.
showed, I think it was like over 11,000 at this point. So, yeah, to
Mm,
your point, I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is that at every single job I've been at, there were tools, probably the most important tools that I had no say in, that I just inherited. And that's almost always your CRM and your marketing automation platform. So I have a lot of different combinations of experience, whether it's Marketo and HubSpot, or sorry, yeah, Marketo and Salesforce, HubSpot and Salesforce, Pardot and Salesforce, Marketo and a custom CRM. Like you usually have to inherit that, because to change a CRM, to change a marketing automation platform, especially if your company has any age to it, is an insane undertaking. It's not something for the faint of heart. It's going to take months, if not quarters, of your time. So at the end of the day, there's some pieces of technology you just need to accept. But importantly, when you're talking about a framework for assessing the tools you have, if we go back to the three pillars I tend to think about marketing operations in: process, data, and systems. Systems is last for a reason. It's because systems are not the thing you start with. It's like if I played golf when I didn't have kids, I played it more, probably better. And you don't get better by buying $1,000 clubs. It's just not the case. If you slice like I do, you're going to slice with $1,000 clubs and just have a very big burning hole in your pocket. But if you get your process down, your swing down, and you've basically done all the homework up to the point of now suddenly the clubs are your impediment, then you need to assess whether you need better clubs. And so the same principle applies to marketing operations. If you're looking at data and you're looking at processes, it makes no sense to get a new system or replace your existing system if you haven't economically optimized those two items first. You go through, and there's another benefit. Not only might you not need to switch, but if you go through the process of fixing your automation, fixing your human process, and fixing your data, if you still run into impediments, you now know what the impediments are because you went through the exercise. You'll know that, okay, well, this system cannot do this process, and we need it for attribution reporting. And therefore, the next system I'm going to buy needs to be able to do this easier so that I can do attribution reporting. And there are going to be some circumstances where you look at the field of technologies and there's no better replacement compared to the one you have, or it's not a huge game changer, in which case it probably makes sense not to switch, even though it's not as nice to say. But if you do find something that has that next step, that can be that version 2.0 and 3.0 of your marketing automation tech stack, then that's the opportunity to change or to buy that new tool, and try and do it before you get to version 2.0. You do it when you're on version 1.0. So you have runway to fix it, to work out all the bugs, and most importantly, train the people who are going to be using it. Because never underestimate how long it takes to train people, because they're not in it. They're not like me. They're not like other marketing ops people who just live and breathe the stuff. They've got other jobs they're doing, and this is just something that either helps them do it or is a component in their job that they need to know how to use, and it needs to be preferably efficient to use and not too cumbersome.
Well, in your examples there, from a technology to technology perspective, and the golf analogy, I think it's a wonderful analogy that you shared. If we raise the level of abstraction a bit to industry,
Mm-hmm.
so would you find, or have you found in your career, that experiences in marketing operations in one industry cross over to another industry? And can you give an example maybe of a learning or the differences between that those two industries? Any thoughts on that comparison?
Oh yeah, so the principles are the same. So like I mentioned, when I was going through that recruiting, those principles I learned about automation, reducing clicks, basically it was a funnel. It was a nonprofit membership funnel. You can take that, and the only major difference is that you actually have revenue attributed to it when you go to an actual for-profit model. And that's nothing to scoff at. Like, not scoffing at it, not saying, oh, revenue attribution, you just stick a number on it, you're done. It's like, no. That's another element, and that's certainly something that was probably the biggest learning curve I had to go through when I got into B2B space. But there is something that I think the nonprofits brought, and I am eternally grateful that I started in nonprofits and then went into for-profits, because when you start in a nonprofit, the biggest difference is your budget is significantly smaller. Oftentimes your line item for a tech is zero. And if you need to get it beyond zero, you need to go to do the greatest sales pitch ever. And I know that the economy right now, if you're in a startup, it's tougher, but before money was flowing a lot more freely, you can make the justification, or just managers would buy a piece of software and hand it to you and say implement it. So by starting in the nonprofit sector, you often need to find a free solution, or you need to find a workaround with your existing system. And so there was a great example. I was talking with someone who was at a nonprofit. They were based in DC and I'm in Virginia. And I was just talking with him, and he was discussing, like, well, we wanted to send out emails to these specific people, kind of like the members I was doing. And we don't want it to get caught in spam filters, and we want to actually send it out in a personalized way. And so I built this macro inside of Outlook that sends these emails, and it personalizes them, and it does it in, a 1 minute, 2 minute delay. And I just stared at him like, you built SalesLoft. Not as pretty, obviously, but you built the core functionality. He was like, I don't know what SalesLoft is. I was like, you just saved your organization tens of thousands of dollars. And yes, it's not as pretty. Yes, it's hacked together. Yes, I'm sure the macro won't win any awards at CES or something, but you built SalesLoft for free. Like, that's incredible. And that's the kind of scrappiness that I know exists in B2Bs, but it's a different type of scrappiness when you're in nonprofits. It's truly, you won't get any money. Even if you try justifying it, you probably won't. So all that to say is I really appreciated the nonprofits being able to give you that on-the-spot training for scrappiness. And then when you come into a B2B role, like when I first came in, I didn't even think about, I could just ask to buy a tool. I was like, let's try and do something in Google Sheets with Zapier, and I can use a free Zapier account, and I can try and limit the numbers of going through. And it's like, you learn a lot, especially on the technical side. And that always helps for inevitably building something out with a real tool. But that has been the biggest, starkest difference between the two.
Oh, that's excellent. I love the your bias for action to always solve something, and I think your example of it's the build versus buy. And, and oftentimes we feel that, the build is better, but sometimes the buy is perfect, perfect choice too. So Matt, at the end of the day, how do you maintain focus with all of the things that you were working on? So many different aspects of your job. How are you maintaining focus?
It's not easy. It's a constant fight, but of course, because I'm an operations person, I try and operationalize my operation of operations. And that is, I try and break down the tasks I'm doing into really 3 buckets. So the first bucket is the emergency request. Something's on fire. I need this now. Ideally, you don't get a lot of these, depending on the organization's structure, how well it's put together, all these different factors. You might get a lot of those, in which case there's not much you can do. The best you can do is create space in your calendar to absorb this. So that's the first part. The second part is things I need to do for other people, reports, building, ABM strategy, whatever it might be, that I can scope out. I can set expectations for when it can be done. I can figure out exactly what they're needing to do, propose alternatives, propose better ways to do it, just say that, no, that's perfect, let's do it that way. That's the easiest one to handle, because you can plot out your day. They know you're going to take 3 days to do this. You can plot it out. The final part, and this also ties into the on fire items, is the large infrastructure changes that are really pushed by you as a marketing operations person. So to give an example, let's say, and I know this happened at one point in my nonprofit sector, and it's also happened in the B2B sector as well, is someone needs a report. They need to know, like, what has been our success over the last quarter on, let's say, a key statistic like SALs, and SALs from a certain source. So this is a report that you put together, and you find all of a sudden that you're putting this together almost every month or maybe every quarter, and you're doing similar things like lead sourcing and attribution. And there's a theme that's growing of these emergency requests. And once you can figure out what that theme is, that is the opportunity to build an infrastructure fix for this. And it's not to say, I'm no longer going to do this for you. That's not what the infrastructure fix is. It can take the form of, I'm going to create a dashboard that's self-service that answers your common questions, all the way to, I'm going to make it easier for myself to pull these reports. And speaking about scrappiness in nonprofits, the way I would do that is, because I couldn't build a crazy contraption inside our CRM, I just created 5 or 6 standard reports. And then I would build an Excel that would ingest those reports and it would spit out the information I needed. And so I built a machine for myself so that when they said, we need this every single month, okay, I can't build a dashboard, I can't build the data, I can't do that level of automation, I can't buy a tool that does it, but I can at least set myself up for success so that what was a 1 to 2 to 3 hour process is now 10 minutes. And that makes life so much easier, and it decreases. Here's the best part. The more infrastructure you do to address those emergency requests, the less you get them, which means you can then invest more time in infrastructure that is not just playing whack-a-mole, but actually building new features, building new capabilities, and you're leveraging up the system. And that's where I think marketing operations can make a huge difference. And it's often hard to see because you're the only person doing this infrastructure. But I know I stated this, the best example is to say, if it's easy for you to pull a report, it's because people have put hundreds of hours in to make it easy to pull.
Yeah.
Data doesn't just organize itself. AI doesn't do that. Someone has to do it. Someone has to build the process and the systems and the data.
And built into what you were just saying is that's the foundation and the start of scalability.
Yep.
Because to your point, you get those one-off requests. Can you do this? Can you do that? Now you've built those reports. Now you've built, sets of reports. Now you've built dashboards or tools to create those dashboards. And now those problems, you're building on the shoulders of those past problems. Mm-hmm. And so that's where scalability starts to really come in, because now you've already solved those. Now I'm solving the next challenge. Yep. I'm solving the next challenge and continuing to build. And so that what I hear in what you just described is scalability.
Yep. And the sign of a successful triumvirate of data, process, and systems is that when you scale, it doesn't break. It doesn't take you a 1-to-1 ratio of hours to scale, because when you build automation and good processes, it should be more of a logarithmic scale where you're getting 100x return for only maybe 2 or 3x of investment in terms of people time. So that's the gold standard. If you're doing well when you can scale and it's not too big of a deal. It doesn't break your system. It doesn't require you to hire 10 more people because they're all manually pressing buttons, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent points. So let's talk about sort of as a marketing operations leader and what it actually takes when you go into a new organization. So as you mentioned, marketing operations really can mean something different to everyone. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about Alloy. When you started there, how did you sort of suss out all of what marketing operations meant to that team? And how do you sort of bring your views, your experiences to what that team's views and experiences of marketing operations are, to then create a cohesive, sort of thought process to then move forward together?
Mm-hmm. So what I found, the most successful way to come into an organization, and this has been through trial and error, not like a prophet or something like that. What I found to be really successful is you go in, you figure out who the people you'll likely work with the most are, and you just ask them what's working and what's not, and just shut up and let them speak and just hear it all. Because when you do enough of those interviews, you can figure out themes of what's wrong, themes of what they want to do, themes of opportunities that you can develop. And marketing operations at the end of the day is attempting to solve process, data, or system problems. And so when you get these themes, you can start putting together, okay, this is what's wrong. You can do your own digging and figure out on the technical side what's wrong. And you'll probably need to ask some questions of people, especially on the user interface front. And then from there, you can start actually addressing those problems and start dealing with them. And so, for instance, when I first started at Alloy, the first thing I was given as a task was, we need to figure out attribution, because we're doing first touch. We want to do multi-touch. We want to get more granular with what we're doing, because I think everyone understands that first touch on the contact to an opportunity has severe limitations. So I started looking at our systems, and at the same time I said, well, while I'm picking stuff out, let me just try building something in Salesforce as both an exercise to myself, but also if it works, we save a bunch of money. And what I found is I was working a lot of marketing data, marketing systems, and then I was like, well, if we're going to do this, we want to integrate sales data too, BDR data. And then I started looking at the BDR data, and I found this isn't integrated into the system. In fact, the data is kind of siloed inside the sales enablement platform, and the process could use a bit of work. And so naturally, it suddenly transformed into me talking to the BDRs and parts of the sales team and understanding where their problems were. And then all of a sudden, I was in charge of their sales enablement tool from an admin perspective. And so I was then fixing the data, fixing the processes within there. And that's when I ran into the problem of this system will not cut it for version 2.0. And that's when I started looking for other things and then found a replacement and then ultimately chose it. And so once that was done, the multi-touch tool now had sales data, it had marketing data, and now suddenly revenue operations and demand gen wanted to see this data for ROI planning. And now suddenly I'm doing more RevOps type stuff, and now I'm on the RevOps team. So what I think marketing operations means is it's problem solving on those three fronts. And it naturally weaves into other teams because marketing isn't a silo. Like, it's not like someone comes in to marketing and then never progresses from that point. Like, some people do, but obviously you want them to become customers. So they're going to go through multiple departments. And because marketing operations handles the top of the funnel, we're the people that usually handle the data at the first source, which means making sure it's programmed right, the process is good, it gets to the sales enablement team and the BDRs as quickly and efficiently as possible. That's absolutely necessary. And so marketing operations, it's problem solvers, but it definitely strays outside the marketing team just out of necessity.
Mm-hmm. Well, in across those three areas, data, process, and systems, even how you've just described that at Alloy and certainly in your past career experiences, it's a complicated machine to create, keep all of this moving, keep everything floating, and it's complicated in complex teams and team structures. So if you think about all of that, how have you found to be the best leader for your team, to give them what they need to remove obstacles, and to keep the engine moving? What's the keys to success for you?
Yeah, I'm still relatively young, by no means an expert. So this is all through trial and error and probably a lot of error as well. What I mentioned before, that a very successful tactic I like doing is meeting with people and just listening to the problems, listening to the opportunities, and just gathering from them what works and what doesn't. Because as a leader, you can't lead by just top down and then deal with the system I've given to you. If you do that, you're going to fail. The system's going to fail and everyone's going to hate you. Instead, you want to have that feedback loop where you're understanding from them what the problem is. Then you take your technical information and marry it with what they're seeing on the user side. You combine it, you put together a first version of this fix, and then you have them use it. You get feedback. And so it's this continuous loop of getting information back from them. And a leader is meant to get that information, facilitate the person's job and what they need to do, and make it easier on them. And then also be there to not only ask what's wrong, but be receptive to what's wrong when it's maybe not expected. Nothing's worse than an employee thinking, oh, I can't go to my boss because they're going to be upset that I tell them it's a stupid idea to do this kind of integration. And so they'll say it more tactfully, but you want people to be empowered to come to you and say, how it was done doesn't really work. Is there another way we can do it? And then be able to adjust accordingly. So that response loop, that a great book written about John Boyd called The OODA Loop. Don't have enough time to go into it. I would recommend everyone read it. It really talks about shortening that loop of getting feedback and then acting, feedback and acting. And I think a good leader takes that loop and shortens it as much as possible while still being efficient for getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that concept as well. Okay, so when you think about physical marketing impressions, so things like promotional items, signage, direct mail, marketing brochures, things that are physical in nature. And then you combine that with digital marketing impressions, website advertisements, digital ads, emails, etc. How do you feel that you're creating and using physical marketing impressions with your digital to create an integrated marketing strategy? And how is that adding value to Alloy, like in this case, or any company? What's been your experience?
Brand, I feel like, is the hardest thing to try and account for as someone who lives in the digital space, because I can't put a UTM code on a brochure. I can't record where that came from. I can't say, oh, well, please make sure you note that. And there are ways you can do it, like self-identification and stuff like that. But physical media is not going anywhere. Promotional items aren't going anywhere. In-person conferences aren't going anywhere. They're all vitally important. And so I think it's looking at those items and saying, if you're doing attribution, for instance, and you know where it came from, great, it's easy. You know that this came from someone signing up at a conference, and then they fill out a demo request and say, I want to see your product. But if someone comes in and let's say it's a demo request and you're like, I've never seen this person before, I've never talked to this person before, I can't even tell if they searched for me on Google, they just came straight to alloy.com. At that situation, you can't say it came from physical media, but you can get an approximation of it. And so physical media, I think, it's always going to have a place. It's always important. It's always the hardest to track, but it's something that you can see. If you've got this unknown pile of revenue and leads and opportunities that came from somewhere, it's probably coming from word of mouth or it's coming from promotional materials. And so those are equally important and also support the fact you'll never be able to track 100% of your funnel. Just accept it. You'll never be able to do it, except there's going to be some granularity, and just do your best. And promotional materials are going to be part of that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And then is there an individual in marketing operations today in the entire industry who you admire? And if so, why is that? And have you found you've incorporated any of their techniques or any of their approaches in your marketing operations?
So I'll say, it's too hard to name just one person, but I'd say if you're just starting out in marketing ops, or even you're a veteran, whatever you want to call it, LinkedIn has an untold number of marketing ops resources. And I feel like I'm super late to the party. I just started posting in January 1st. It was not a New Year's resolution. I just started doing it. And then everyone says, oh, my New Year's resolution is to post more. I'm like, no, I actually want to keep doing this, though. I don't want it to be associated with that. But there are people who have been doing posts about marketing operations for years on LinkedIn, and they have great followings. They share incredible insights. Like, you don't necessarily need to go to a class. And there's certainly no marketing operations graduate degree that you can come away with that I know of. So go to LinkedIn, find people who post about marketing operations, figure out who likes their posts and follow them, and just start absorbing this information from these people. And, there are going to be points where you disagree, but the whole purpose of this discussion is to see what other people are doing, see how it fits with your current situation, because everyone's marketing operations situation, their company is going to be different. Like, I've been at 4 different companies, 2 nonprofits, 2 for-profits. Every single situation has been different, but you can take and derive principles from it and ideas for what people are doing, and you can inform how you're going to do marketing operations where you are and where you want to go in the future. So without a doubt, get on LinkedIn. Even if you're just going to be a watcher and not liking or participating, there are so many resources to just follow, listen, take it in, see if you can apply it to your own situation, and just keep doing that.
Love it. Great advice. And then, Matt, we just released on this podcast recently an episode on artificial intelligence. You mentioned that actually at the beginning of the episode, and then how that will impact marketing and content creation, in the future. So, as you look forward, say 5 years into the future, how do you see AI sort of making a difference in your work?
So just like every projection, mine's probably going to be terribly wrong, but let's do it anyway. So if I'm looking at artificial intelligence, when ChatGPT came out, I feel like the entire world just logged on and wanted to try stuff, right? And when I tried it, I was amazed. I would start typing in like, how would I do Python for something that I haven't done before? And, I would see it, and I know Python decently. I'm no expert on it. And I would see it's like, wow, it's just spitting out code at me. This is amazing. And then I said to myself, all right, let me ask it a question that I have expertise on. And so I posted this. I'm going to remind myself of exactly what it said. So basically, I asked ChatGPT to write instructions to build a Salesforce flow, which checks a box true if certain information is missing. And to its credit, it spit out instructions that would build a correct Salesforce flow. So right there and then, ChatGPT was showing that you can get real training and real responses on something that would be a lot harder to find. You'd need to do some trial and error. You need to figure it out like in an actual sandbox environment on your own before you can actually, it jumpstarts the learning process. But, and this is the big but, it definitely wasn't perfect. And this is where it has a rudimentary understanding, but where expertise, it still has not captured yet. And I'm a bit dubious about how much expertise it can capture even as it evolves. Because here are the three things that the flow actually didn't do. I don't want to say correctly, but didn't do with the right granularity, let's just say. So the first thing is that it built the flow and it just didn't have any start conditions, which means it was going to run on every single record in your Salesforce instance, despite the fact I only wanted to find a couple of records that were missing this data. So right then and there, ChatGPT proposed something that worked, but would have been horribly inefficient. It would have spent a lot of API resources and whatnot, and it just would have cycled through this and done nothing, right? The second part is that I didn't tell it what object I was talking about, and it assumed it was the account object, but I was thinking the contact object. So in that situation, if you didn't know better, if you're like, I don't need marketing ops people, I can just ask ChatGPT and it'll tell me what to do. You would do that, and then you would suddenly say, wait a second, data's not appearing, and it's on the account instead. So that was the second part. And then the third part was, I asked it to build a flow, but what I did could have been built as a formula. And that would take way less resources than an actual flow, and it would be instantaneous and you wouldn't have to put it on a schedule. But it didn't recommend that. It didn't say, wait a second, I think we should just do a formula instead of a flow. Now, I know that you can ask questions to get ChatGPT to give you more specifics and whatnot, but it just shows that, like a Google search, if you just Google search and you take the first result and you execute on it, you're going to get quality commensurate with the first result on a Google search. Whereas if you have expertise and you're doing more research and you're doing testing it and getting feedback and learning along the way, you're going to be able to propose stuff that AI doesn't capture yet. So I'm sure it's going to continue to eat more and more into the expertise section. But at the end of the day, all of these problems are unique. They have similar themes, but they're still unique. And so there's a human element that I'm doubtful AI is going to be able to completely replace. So I just view AI as something that is like a Google search, but the next evolution of it. Instead of pinging and figuring out what's there, it's going back and forth with someone, asking it questions and saying, is this really the right way to do it? What about using a formula field? But you need to have enough expertise to know what to ask. And if you don't know what you don't know, just getting an answer is not actually a good thing. It actually might be detrimental because you don't see a difference of opinion, which you get in Google.
Correct. Great story. That's a great story, Matt. Really well said. So Matt, before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway that you want to share to help understand the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
So I'd say that if you're a marketing executive, you're thinking about marketing operations, if you keep asking yourself, why is this so hard when you're running a report? Or you're wondering why your data is not in good place, or you're wondering why the system seems to not do so well. That is the time when you need to have someone come in who can solve these problems. You need someone that can come in and say, here's the problem with the data, here's the problem with the process, here's the problem with the system, here's how we fix all these three things, and then take that feedback and continue to evolve. Because I think every company is at some stage. They could be the basket case stage where their data is awful, their processes are awful, and their systems are in shambles, or they could be in a really fantastic place. But at all levels of that spectrum for a company, marketing operations people can come in and add value. The basket case is the easiest. We get all these systems working. You save time. We're able to get information faster. The time to talking to a lead is faster. Like, those are the obvious ones. What's harder for people to understand is if you think your systems are in a great place and all this is in a great place, then getting the right marketing ops person can then propose the next evolution, the thing that can put your operation ahead of all the others. So it's never a process that's done. It's always opportunities to improve or to fix what's broken. But ideally, you fix what's broken and then you have things to improve. And when you're able to do that in an environment like we're in right now, where the funding spigots are pretty much dried up and everyone's like, what's our pipeline? What's our revenue? What's our spend? Don't skimp on your operations people, because at some point things are going to turn around. At some point things are going to change, and then you need to scale. And the time to scale is not when you need to scale. The time to build that infrastructure is 6 months before, 12 months before, because all the things I've built, like multi-touch and customer journey and the sales enablement tools, those took months, and I was able to act pretty quickly. And so if you need to do all of that when you're able to scale, you're going to miss it. Those opportunities are going to pass by and you're not going to be ready for it. So you need to prepare. In fact, now is probably the best time to be preparing, because if, let's say, we exit this Techmageddon recession, whatever you want to call it, in, let's say, the next 3 to 6 months, means you only got about 3 to 6 months to really figure this stuff out and be prepared for when things boomerang back to being good.
Outstanding. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt.
Thank you, Glenn. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, fantastic. Well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.